What if the greatest act of rebellion isn't protest, but telling the truth in a world built on lies? Discover how legal frameworks, historical precedent, and moral courage intersect in the fight for individual sovereignty against creeping totalitarianism. 1. The institutionalization of falsehood. Throughout history, lies have been harnessed for political utility, to conceal corruption, obscure intent, and manipulate public will. In totalitarian states, this deception becomes systemic. Political philosopher Hannah Arendt argued that totalitarianism seeks to transform reality into fiction. This transformation extends beyond propaganda. It aims to reconstruct society's understanding of truth itself. Alexander Solzhenitsyn and Václav Havel identify this process as a cultural re-engineering where falsehoods permeate daily life, dismantling individuals' ability to discern moral or factual ground. The resulting environment is one in which every institution, statistic, and memory may be distorted for the benefit of state control. Footnote: this section explores how lies serve as a structural foundation in totalitarian regimes, reshaping public perception and institutional function. 2. Truth as the antithesis of tyranny. The lie in totalitarian regimes is not occasional or strategic, it is constitutive. Solzhenitsyn described Soviet Russia as a state whose very foundation rested on lies. Havel echoed this sentiment, portraying life under communism as dominated by falsified narratives of past, present, and future. Lies are not just spoken, they are lived. By compelling individuals to perform roles steeped in deceit, totalitarian regimes demand internal complicity, converting citizens into participants in the falsification of reality. This structure enables the regime to persist not solely through force, but through mass habituation to dishonesty. Footnote: this section emphasizes that totalitarian systems depend on societal-wide participation in falsehood, making truth a direct threat to their survival. 3. Mass compliance and the psychological mechanism of control. Tyranny does not prevail by physical dominance alone. It endures through psychological accommodation and moral retreat. Solzhenitsyn contends that every citizen bears a share of responsibility for totalitarian rule. Havel explains this compliance as existential, a product of humanity's capacity to adapt to the lie. Totalitarian systems thrive not merely by alienating the public, but by transforming this alienation into a source of systemic reinforcement. Through everyday acts of silence and complicity, individuals internalize and reproduce the regime's lies, inadvertently becoming both prisoners and wardens. Footnote: this section illustrates how personal conformity becomes a mechanism of state preservation in repressive societies. 4. Internal rebellion, the individual's legal and moral awakening. Both Solzhenitsyn and Havel propose that the primary battleground against totalitarianism lies within the individual soul. Change does not begin with revolutions or legislation, but with a personal reorientation toward truth. Solzhenitsyn's call to live not by lies urges individuals to break the cycle of submission by refusing to endorse falsehood, even in passive forms. Havel similarly advocates for an ethical awakening that leads to authentic living, what he calls living within the truth. This moral resistance reclaims sovereignty from the state and redirects it to conscience. Footnote: this section identifies internal moral resolve as the essential condition for resisting totalitarian rule. 5. Legal nonparticipation, the doctrine of civil refusal. The practical expression of moral awakening is nonparticipation in lies. This doctrine of civil refusal is neither protest nor rebellion in the traditional sense. It is a legal and ethical stance that refuses to perpetuate falsehood. Havel and Solzhenitsyn agree that the most effective destabilization of tyranny begins with simple truthfulness. The refusal to speak untruths, act inauthentically, or pretend belief strikes at the heart of the regime's psychological dominance. Such acts realign society with reality and expose the fragility of the state's constructed order. Footnote: this section frames truth-telling and authenticity as lawful acts of resistance capable of unraveling systemic oppression. 6. The cultural reawakening and role of spontaneity. According to Hannah Arendt, spontaneity, defined as unregulated, creative, and unpredictable human action, is the antithesis of totalitarianism. To live within the truth is to practice spontaneity, authenticity, and moral choice. These attributes defy the regime's demand for mechanical conformity. Artists, writers, and ordinary citizens become vital agents in this cultural reawakening. Their refusal to conform restores public dignity and weakens the regime's ideological monopoly, ultimately sowing the seeds for broader transformation. Footnote: this section explains how cultural authenticity and creative expression serve as subversive forces against totalitarian uniformity. 7. The Power of Dissent, a case study in musical resistance. In 1976, a Czech rock band named the Plastic People of the Universe was arrested for refusing to conform to communist artistic regulation. Their persecution became a rallying point for dissidents, including Havel, and galvanized public support. The trial marked a turning point, as citizens recognized that failing to defend the liberty of others jeopardized their own. This illustrates how seemingly minor acts of defiance can fracture a system reliant on silence and obedience. Footnote: this section offers empirical proof that individual acts of cultural defiance can trigger collective moral rejuvenation and social upheaval. 8. Structural fragility of totalitarian rule. Despite their appearance of invincibility, totalitarian regimes are inherently brittle. Havel describes the state's ideological shell as a fabric that tears under the pressure of truth. One honest voice can expose the fiction sustaining the system, prompting a chain reaction of disillusionment and awakening. This fragility explains why regimes respond so aggressively to dissent. Even minimal breaches in conformity pose existential threats to their stability. Footnote: this section demonstrates that totalitarian systems are structurally unsound and vulnerable to moral disobedience. 9. Individual responsibility in legal and moral context. History invalidates the myth that individuals are powerless in the face of tyranny. Solzhenitsyn's maxim that one man who stopped lying could bring down a tyranny is supported by the Velvet Revolution and the fall of Soviet communism. These precedents affirm that integrity, when enacted at scale, can reshape law, policy, and society. Thus, each individual's moral choice becomes a legal fulcrum upon which political systems pivot. Footnote: this section asserts that collective liberty is forged through individual moral agency and civic action. 10. Final judgment. Truth as the last bastion of liberty. Totalitarianism relies on convincing citizens to forsake conscience for comfort. Solzhenitsyn condemns those who trade truth for privilege, labeling them not intellectuals but cowards. The enduring choice is binary: uphold the truth and defend liberty, or acquiesce to lies and enable oppression. True resistance demands neither weapons nor banners. It demands the courage to reject falsehood and stand for what is right, even when the cost is high. Footnote: this concluding section reinforces that truth is the non-negotiable foundation of justice, liberty, and lawful order.